Okay. In this presentation, I think I just speak out without any sharing screen in order to allow you to see my face clearly. When we talk about the assimilation, we can say directly to force people to become more. For example, the assimilation of the Chinese in Thailand and in Indonesia is to force Chinese people to become more Thai or more Indonesian, according to the government policy. So in this presentation, I have two research questions. The first one is I will look at how has the Chinese religion been controlled and assimilated to according to each country, Indonesia and Thailand. And the second, I will look at the responses from the Chinese themselves. How do they respond to that policy, and in order to maintain their own identity or to create the invented the new identity in that particular country. Actually, I should mention my argument here. The first one, I think, when we study, especially the Chinese in overseas Southeast Asian countries, we always assume that they are the single group. They have the identity, but actually in this presentation, I will claim that they are very diverse and their identities also very fragmented. So when we look at the Chinese, I don't think that we can use the term solidarity or the uniqueness of the Chinese. So I will show you later the example from Indonesia and from Thailand. And the second, when we talk about the assimilation again, we always see that we see them as the victim. Actually, they also have some potential, some agency to respond. And in this presentation, I provide some examples. In Thailand and in Indonesia, I think we have the same problem. I mean, during the 1960s, 70s until now. But of course now the situation is better. Previously, we perceived Chinese as problematic, so that's why we must have the assimilation policy, for example, to force them not to use the. We also closed the Chinese school, forced them to change their name, their surname to be more Thai and more Indonesian. The situation in Thailand is better in that case. I think one of the reasons is Chinese in Thailand can be counted as a majority, one of the majority groups. While in Indonesia, they are the very, very minority. So it's also easy to become a victim. In Indonesia, because of the we call religious state. So Indonesia also recognize Confucianism as one of their religions, but Thailand never recognized this. The difference is that when the government recognized Confucianism in Indonesia became more kind of formalized. They have their new identity, and according to Indonesian perspective of religion, we must have the Nabi or the prophet. So even though maybe we cannot say Confucius is the prophet of Confucianism. Confucianism is religion is very is abnormal. I think in Thailand, so we never perceive Confucianism as a religion. In China itself, also never. Of course, maybe they have a political reason in order to define Confucianism as a culture or adat in Bahasa Indonesia, in order to use this to spread their Chinese identity, not in the name of religion. But when it became the religion, especially in Indonesia, the story of Confucius become very, very miraculous. For example, he can walk like the Buddha when he was born. He can walk 7 steps or have many signs from the heaven in order to show the miracle. So the Also, the ritual in Confucianism also very formalized. It's changed from the individual prayer become the communal one, for example. And this is quite new, especially the case of Indonesia. Um, in Thailand, as I already mentioned, Thailand never recognized Confucianism as a religion. So yeah, maybe we can say it directly because the Thai government want to force Chinese people to become more Theravada Buddhism. So of course they have nowadays they also have to join the Buddhist celebration, the Buddhist holiday, the Buddhist ritual. Even though they also join the Chinese festival as previously. Uh, the differences between belonging to the what we call the religious, which is recognized by the state, and they have more. I can say that in Thailand actually they, even though the government uh, does not recognize Confucianism as a religion, but this is, we can say, is an advantage of the Chinese in the sense that they have more freedom to organize their own organization. Now the organization is in the form of we call the Kuson Satan, the private organizations cannot be counted as a temple or vihara. Uh, but in Indonesia, as I already mentioned, when it's become one of the recognized divisions, it's also under the control and the eyes of the state. So it cannot be fragmented or diverse as previously. Mm, maybe I should also mention that the trend to modernize religions, Buddhism of course included. Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism in Indonesia is quite clear since 1930. Uh, in order to modernize, of course, they try to deny a lot of supernatural stories. So, in the organization, for example, the Patavia Buddhist organization, they at that time they have a lot of policy to modernize their religion. Patavia Buddhist organization is not only the Buddhist organization, but also we call the three Dhamma. Three Dhammas or San Jiao is the three teachings: Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. So the purpose is actually to prevent Indonesian Chinese not to convert to Christianity or Islam. So this organization play an important role at that time. So, but in terms of their members, they also have a lot of arguments. For example, in order should they invite the Theravada monks to Indonesia or not? For example, uh, this example, I just want to show that Indonesian Chinese are very diverse. So, a lot of them also want to modernize their religion, and some also not, and a lot also uh, want to separate religion from. Previously, they have as I call the three Dhamma. So Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism is a Chinese identity that cannot be separated. We can say that. But in order to modernize their religions, they also want to have their own the single religions. They want to separate. For example, Buddhists want to separate them from Confucianism and Taoism. So they have this argument and this negotiation all the time until now. So from this case, we cannot claim anymore that the Chinese is a single group, opposite to the Pribumi or the local people, as many scholars always claim. In Thailand, until now, we still can see that, if they belong to Hakka or Hokkien, they will go to the temple, no, not the temple, the Chinese place that belong to their family. So if they are Hokkien, they will try not to go to the Hakka shrine, for example. So this is also the example of the fragmentation or diversity of the Chinese. Mm. So let me give some example. I claim since the very beginning that Thailand and Indonesia try to force Chinese people to be more Theravada. Just an example from Thailand. We have the Buddha image named Sam Pao Gong or Zheng He. And of course, this name is from China. Um, in Thai Theravada temple, we translate this term into the not only the Chinese tradition, but we use it as the tilakkhana or the trilak, the three characteristic of the Dhamma, the impermanence, suffering, and non-self, for example. We use the Chinese term to explain the Theravada teaching. Or even the term San Jiao itself means the three teachings, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. But in Thailand, we transform it. We can say directly, we distort it to be San Jiao. San Jiao, so this term is very profound meaning, but in Thai language, it means the place of the spirit or the place of ghost, uh, which is called lower than religions, and that's why in Thai tradition we don't perceive Confucianism, Taoism, or Chinese tradition as a religion because actually we have a sense to respect religion. So this kind of tradition is cannot be respected at least as equal as the Thai tradition, Thai Theravada. Mm, yeah, let me say some ritual. In Thailand, as I already mentioned, when it's not recognized, the three Dhamma is not recognized by the government. So they have their own organizations. So and they also have freedom in organizing the whatever ritual. And for example, the festival of vegetarian, vegetarian food. Um, this one, I think this one became beyond religion. So even though you are not identifying yourself as a Chinese or Buddhist, but you also can consume the vegetarian food, especially in that particular month, the festival. So this is come to my concept of this paper that I use the term beyond religion or beyond the boundary of ethnicity. And the second case is like Guan Yin, the Avalokitesvara. Even though you are not identifying yourself as Chinese or Mahayana Buddhist, but Guan Yin is already transformed to be a compassionate God that everyone can access. So in this point, I'm going to claim that not only the Chinese are forced to become to respect or to become more with the local people, but the local people, if we believe that it exists, if the local people, the local Thai and the people in Indonesia, they also consume the Chinese traditions, Chinese belief. I don't know they know or not, but for example, Confucianism, if they don't believe in the Guan Yin, but the Guan Yin now in Confucianism is also very popular. So this, for example, this go beyond the religious boundary and the religious, not religious but ethnic identity also. So I finish here, and thank you so much for your attention.